What's up, guys? We are back with another Masters of the Universe review, but we are talking about an entirely new toy line today. We're taking a look at the first of the Masters of the Universe Masterverse line for the new Revelation show on Netflix, and we're taking a look at, well, it's not He-Man and it's not Skeletor, it is Skelegod, which... kind of a spoiler since, we don't know really anything about what's going on with this or what he has to do with the show, although I have some ideas based on an accessory in here. But I'm really curious to see what's going on with this line. Obviously, I'm a huge MOTU fan. I loved Masters of the Universe Classics, and this is the next stage in adult collector-ish style He-Man figures. So of course, we have to take a look. This guy does come in a pretty... I don't know, nondescript box, but it's a weird shape. So it's really wide. Of course, he's a deluxe figure, so he's a bit bigger. It's wide, but it's like got all these weird cutouts on the side. So it's some sort of odd trapezoidal shape. But it's just sort of a blue with black kind of fade design on the front. You've got a big window there with Skelegod in the middle. Just his name on one side, and then some pretty solid artwork on the other side with more artwork that wraps around to the back. You've got a bio for this guy, as well as a cross-sell for the other figures in the first wave. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go. Out of the package are Masters of the Universe Masterverse Revelation, this is a mouthful, Skelegod figure. This guy is very interesting for, just a number of reasons. Obviously, we truly don't know what this thing is just yet as of, me recording this video. It's a brand new line from Mattel. It's very different from anything else I've ever gotten from Mattel personally, because I don't collect wrestling figures, and that's, their big other line currently, outside of MOTU Origins, of course. But this is a very, very different beast entirely from anything they've ever done, Masters of the Universe, for sure. Not to mention the fact that this is a crazy-looking Skeletor. And, yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on here. I'm a lot happier with this figure in hand than I really thought I was going to be. This guy basically boils down to being like the Super Shredder of Masters of the Universe. He is a wacky, goofy, over-the-top version of Skeletor, by all accounts. And it's kind of cool. There is some interesting stuff going on here when it comes to articulation. This guy is fully pinless, too. I know some people don't really care about that kind of thing, but I like it from an aesthetic standpoint. He has no pins, so they're kind of keeping pace with Hasbro, I suppose, in some respects. He is a little limited because of, well, look at him. He has a ton of stuff sitting over top of him, but for the most part, he works pretty well as like a big hulking monster Skeletor. So let's see what he can do. We've got a head that can look up about that far. He can look down really good. You do have a little tilt side to side and full rotation. Of course, there is a lot of business up here, and that's where he's really most hindered. He has this huge mantle that sits on his shoulders, so it messes with his arm's ability to go out and then, of course, rotate. So they can rotate, but it's just going to stop them. And I will say right off the bat, getting this thing to sit back normally is proving to be a challenge for me, because there are actually some pegs that it sits into, which I have a hard time finding when I'm putting it on. Not to mention the fact that there's an interesting way that this cape attaches. So, just beware if you're about to knock this thing off. There is a bicep swivel. We've got double jointed elbows with very, very good range. And then you've got hinges at the wrists. So he does have kind of spiked gauntlets right here, so it prohibits him from going too far up, but he goes down really good, and then rotation, of course. We've got a diaphragm cut, and it's okay. It allows him to go forward slightly, backwards a little bit of tilt, and then you can sort of bobble him around. It's not exactly meant for rotation. That occurs at the waist itself, so it's really just for tilt there. Legs go out about that far. They kick forward all the way, but he does have kind of a rigid but gummy cod piece here, so it's going to get in the way a little bit. Kick backwards slightly. You've got a thigh cut. We've got double jointed knees, and mine are kind of tight. Not in the sense that I'm concerned about them, but just that's what they are. Pretty good range for a big figure. We've got a boot cut, and then you've got rocker. It's kind of minimal, and then you've got hinge, because he's got these points down here, right here, that kind of get in the way. You can sort of get him to go up over, but I've had trouble making it happen every time without too much fuss. So This guy is, I mean, he's very well articulated in the sense of that he has a lot of joints. He is very hindered at the shoulders, though, just in terms of range, but the rest of him is pretty solid. So this is definitely a lot more articulation than Origins, and it's a lot more articulation than Classics for sure. I mean, that goes without saying. But he's very modern feeling. He has a lot of the hallmarks of a current action figure line, which of course this is. But I'm really pleased with how this guy moves so far. And again, I do really like the fact that he does not have any pins in the elbows or the knees. I would, however, hazard a guess that a lot of folks are mostly interested in this figure from an aesthetic standpoint because, well, look at him. He is a large, hulking, transformed, mutated, empowered, whatever in the world it is, Skeletor. And I mean, there's a lot of things that are Skeletor-ish about him, but at the same time, this guy doesn't look anything like Skeletor in many respects. He has the blue skin, which is a different shade than we're used to. He's got the skull, and he has a purple cape. So that's kind of it. Those are some of those color hallmarks that we've got. So the purple cape is a callback to Skeletor, of course. The blue skin is a callback to Skeletor. The skull, but he's very much his own thing, and for the most part, I'm cool with it. I'm really curious to see what this guy is, what he does within the show. But as far as a toy, it's pretty cool. There is a lot of stuff going on here. He is very big. He's very accentuated in a lot of his sculpts. So his arms are really big. His hands are huge. His feet are elongated. They are much, much longer than I thought they were going to be. They definitely kind of extend quite a bit out. He's got just a lot of larger parts. And, like the mantle on his shoulders here for his cape is absolutely massive. It is really cool, though, too. I like these big monster spikes that sit on his chest. And then, of course, they sort of drape around what is essentially like green fire, I'm assuming, that's coming out of the neck area. Obviously, I don't know, but that's sort of what it looks like. We've even got so much as to have a green and sort of magenta H on his chest, which is really interesting. Of course, I have no idea what it means, truly, but it's pretty cool. I do like all these green accents that are within the armor. You've got him on, he's basically got a bunch of faces all over him. So there's like eyes in the shoulder pieces here. He's got eyes down at his crotch for some reason. He's got eyes on his gauntlets. The gauntlets are removable. So if you pop the hands off, you can slide them off. The mantle piece is removable. It does have pegs that it fits into the collar area on, and it sits fine, but I do have a hard time putting it back on. Like, it's really hard to know where those peg holes actually are, but at the same time, I'm really not so sure that it matters. He does have a cape, which is really, really weird, honestly. So it's 3 pieces of fabric that are held together with like a plastic bar, this thing right here, that is then clamped together from the inside. So you've got this short piece, you've got these 2 pieces that have these plastic diamonds on the inside and the outside here, and then you've got the longer piece that is like a 2-tone fabric, dark purple and light purple, and it actually just sort of clips in. So there's these little clips right here that will attach to the back of his armor like that. And I've found myself knocking it off quite a bit, but it's very simple to just sort of stick it back on, and there you go. Obviously, any kind of cape would be better with a wire in it, but at the same time, for a retail level figure, I think it's actually pretty decent, and I'm okay with it. It hangs well. It's not too long. The 3 levels of fabric is an interesting approach, but it works pretty well, and I do like the doodads on it back there. They're weird and different, but I like the idea behind it. It just makes it seem a little bit more robust, and it's just a weird looking figure, and I'm not saying weird in a negative sense. There is just a lot to soak in here. I mean, everything is big and over the top and gaudy, which is why I keep going back to Super Shredder on this guy. It's everything about the regular version of the character, just ratcheted up to the 10th degree, and regardless of what he does or doesn't do in the show, I think as a toy, this actually translates pretty well. I mean, he just looks like a big hulking beast with a lot of Skeletor attributes. Of course, the big one is going to be the head sculpt, and it may seem a little small to me at times. I think I'm relatively okay with it. It does seem to be a little on the small side, like a lot of other figures in this line seem to be. Obviously, this is the only one I have so far. But there's something about like this setup here. So there's a lot of distance between his collar and his actual the base of his head. So there's all that fire. You've got the mantle that sits around him. But I think the head sculpt is pretty cool. It's a very evil looking head. There's a good bit of wash in there, different color tones for the skull versus the teeth themselves. And then of course you've even got painted eyes inside those deep sockets, and you've got the massive sort of ram skull style horns that stick out, which is of course a big callback to the Havoc staff, which he does not come with. So I do think this guy's actually pretty cool. It's weird, it's different. I like that when it comes to my toys. And again, I don't know what's going on with this guy. I have my theory based on what we have in the box, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But I think Mattel actually did a pretty good job. The only real negative that I've got to say about this figure, just in a general sense, is that he has kind of loose ankles. They are kind of loosey-goosey. I'm going to have to figure something out about those. But as far as the figure itself goes, I think he looks pretty solid. There's some weird, interesting designs. I like the use of translucent plastic. I like all the accentuated nature of just everything. And I even like the cape. It's weird, it's different, and honestly, it's a pretty ingenious way to attach the cape to the body without having it kind of pegged into the back, which I just plain don't like. Now, of course, we have to do some size comparisons because I've talked about this guy being big and hulking. So we've got a Origin Skeletor here on the left, and I had to throw up a Classics figure, but of course it has to be the one true God Skeletor. Well, God Skeletor from the movie. And you can see that he's big, he's beefy, but he's not too much bigger than a Classics figure. Similar, but not too much bigger. He definitely has a lot more girth and beefiness to him in some respects, but it's about the same size height-wise. I mean, this Skeletor actually is a little bit taller thanks to his horns up there, but it's barely different. So he does have a lot of size to him for sure. Let's move this guy aside. And we'll bring in a Mythic Legion. So here is Arethyr for comparison. And then let's take this guy away, and we'll go with something a little bit more, I don't know, standard. So how about a Black Series? Here is a Boba Fett right there, the Black Series, the original Boba Fett. So you get an idea what he looks like next to a 6-inch figure, which he very much towers over most of those. And then here he is with a Marvel Legends for something similar, but again, different. So here he is with Red Skull from the recent Villains wave. So more of the same when it comes to Boba Fett. And then for maybe something a little bit different, how about a Figuarts? We've got the recent Battle Damage Iron Man Mark 6, although he's not damaged now. And you can see he again very much towers over him, just like he does the Legends, just like he does the Black Series. So this guy does have a lot of size. He is really beefy. He's not huge, you know, he's not absolutely massive, but he's in the 7 to 8 inch range, and he is definitely going to look really good, even alongside other Classics figures, and then I'm sure he's going to scale nicely with the other figures within his own line whenever we get them. Now, as far as accessories goes, Skelegod doesn't have tons, but I think he has some pretty substantive accessories. He's got a couple big ones. The first of which is this big green glob of translucent plastic that you can sleeve over top of one of his open palm hands. So it's basically like a fireball effect, or maybe a Thunder Punch style effect, you know, if we want to go for like an actual reference to another He-Man figure. I don't know that that's what that's supposed to be here, but it certainly looks the part in some respect. It goes very well with the color scheme of the figure, so you've got the green for the H, for all of the eyes all over the armor, and then of course for the translucent green throat plastic that he has there. So this is just a big glob of plastic, but it does work pretty well. It's easy to put on, take off, the whole deal. He does come with some gripping hands, so you get a set of gripping hands, and they're big oversized mitts basically. So you get a total of 4 hands for this guy. And then he comes with, I mean, arguably the most important accessory here. We get the Power Sword. So this, I'm assuming, is going to be like the sword for the show and for the line. This is likely the same thing that I expect we're going to get with He-Man, I would wager. It just looks small because Skeletor is a bigger figure. It's very slender and it's very long. And like for comparison's sake, you know, here are a couple of the classic swords. So like the actual classic sword and then a mini comic sword. This is Wundar's sword because it's close for some reason. So you can see that they are very much different. It's thinner, it's longer. So it's just a different shape, different style, the whole deal. I'm okay with it. like it has some classic look and feel to it. I would say I still prefer the classic swords or the original vintage swords even, just personal preference wise, because it does look kind of weird in Skelegod's hands. It looks much, much smaller than it probably should be. But if what I'm considering here is right, and that this is He-Man's sword just in his hands, then it makes sense. You know, we might see the same kind of thing in the show where it looks smaller than it needs to be for a character of this size. So that's just some conjecture on my part. I don't really know yet, but that's sort of what I'm leaning towards, just based on the whole idea that this is probably Skeletor after he transforms with the sword. Possible spoiler alert, I guess. But I do think he has a pretty solid array of accessories regardless. Not a lot of stuff again, but I think he has some pretty substantial ones with the sword, with the energy effect, which I do like to see. Since he doesn't have the Havoc Staff, this is a good way to represent some magic for Skeletor. And then, of course, the extra hands to be able to hold the sword. So overall, this guy is, I mean, despite the fact that I don't know what he's really supposed to do yet, I think he's pretty cool. It works as a toy, and that's ultimately what it's all about here, is that it works as a toy. It's got a wacky, big, goofy design. It moves pretty well. It has a solid array of accessories. I do think that power sword is oddly sized, but I'm assuming it's for He-Man specifically, and not necessarily one for Skelegod here. But I think it's a pretty cool figure. He's big, he's beefy. He's got a really solid head sculpt, maybe a little on the small side, but it looks really good. Dig the use of translucent plastic, like the energy effect. I even like the weird goofy cape and all of the big over-the-top accentuated details on this guy. He is, for all intents and purposes, a really cool, big, hulking, goofy-looking Skeletor god thing guy, whatever it is. So that's going to do it for this look at the Masters of the Universe, Masterverse, Revelation Skelegod. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.